Hello and welcome back to 365 Days with mxmtoon. I'm Maia, a singer, songwriter, video maker, and Oakland native. I'm also a huge history nerd. I love untold stories, gross facts, hidden secrets, anything weird, dark, and funky from the past. Each day, I'm going to share some of my favorite deep cuts with you. So let's dig into today's stories.
It's 365 with mxmtoon. New facts every day, so don't leave too soon. I'm gonna teach you stuff, no it won't be tough. Gonna go a year till you've had enough. It's 365 mxmtoon.
Today in 1781, Major General Lord, yep, 3 titles, Charles Cornwallis surrendered to George Washington, who was, at the time, a general, not yet the first president, and Count Baptiste de Rochambeau in Yorktown, Virginia, effectively ending the Revolutionary War. But let's back up. The Revolutionary War began in 1775, so it had been going on for 6 years by the time Cornwallis surrendered. You might be familiar with the premise. The residents of England's 13 colonies in North America were frustrated with the rule of British royalty and didn't like that they were being taxed without having representation in the government. Within a year, small conflicts became a full-scale war for the colonist independence from the British Empire. In 1778, France entered the conflict in alliance with the colonists. The French intervention is what ultimately helped the colonists secure victory at Yorktown, but we'll get to that in a minute. From 1778 to 1781, the colonists and the British Crown wrestled back and forth over who had an advantage in the conflict. For a while, it seemed like the British were coming out ahead. The American colonists suffered when Benedict Arnold, an army officer, defected back to the British. Fun fact, in the following years, Benedict Arnold would become a synonym for traitor. And the British captured important localities like Georgia and Charleston, South Carolina. Cornwallis was leading the Brits' southern strategy and had secured multiple victories. In late 1780, Nathaniel Greene replaced Horatio Gates as the American commander of the South, and that's when the Americans' luck began to change. By the next fall, Greene had forced Cornwallis's troops to the Yorktown Peninsula in Virginia. George Washington and Jean-Baptiste Rochambeau led 17,000 troops to Yorktown to surround the established British war presence. French Admiral François de Grasse even surrounded the town from the sea, placing his men on the Chesapeake Bay and the York River, because Washington planned to run Cornwallis out of Yorktown from multiple angles. Cornwallis had tried to organize with the British forces to have more men meet him in Yorktown, but the troops never arrived. The French Navy kept ships from entering on the coast of Yorktown. When the troops met in Yorktown, Washington organized an all-out assault on the British. There were fewer soldiers and a side, but as they'd cut off all the British supply chains, the Americans were able to use their cannon supply to weaken the British army, and eventually they ran out of their food and ammunition. With no access to more resources, they couldn't continue fighting. Another famous American, Alexander Hamilton, played a big part as well. Hamilton convinced Washington to give him a shot at running the final siege. Hamilton ended up proving himself, hiding in a trench and then sprinting across a field with bayonets. He only lost 9 of his soldiers in the attack, compared to the startling losses on the British side. Between the French and American presence, the British troops were completely exhausted. There wasn't any way for troops to escape, so Cornwallis agreed to the terms that Washington set forth for him to surrender, which were called the Articles of Capitulation. According to folklore, his troops marched out of Yorktown to the tune, "The World Turned Upside Down." How did the Americans pull off this defeat? Washington had a secret plan. He convinced the British troops that he was going for an attack on New York, but swung south to Yorktown instead to surprise Cornwallis and ambush the southern faction of the British troops. He ordered construction of large forts around their New York bases so that it looked like his troops were preparing for a long stay. He also prepared false war plans for attacks in New York and organized that they fall into British hands. That way, Cornwallis wasn't prepared for Washington's assault of troops, and that's how he became the war legend he's known as today. The victory had seemed impossible, and thus Washington was vastly praised for his role in the battle and how that led to America's independence. He became such a mythical figure that some of the facts that we know about him today aren't even true. He didn't chop down a cherry tree. That was made up by one of his biographers. He didn't have wooden teeth either. He did wear dentures, but they were made from human and animal teeth and just tended to look like wood in pictures because of their low quality. Washington had actually been planning on retiring. He ended up becoming president instead, though he never ended up living in the White House. Washington, D.C. wasn't even the capital yet, so President Washington lived in 2 New York residences. General Cornwallis didn't let this defeat define him. He governed in Ireland and India and was known for his reforms. The war didn't officially end for another 2 years, on September 3rd, 1793, when the Paris Treaty was signed, and that, somehow or another, is how we got to today in America. Now, let's talk about our music fact. You may know this next guest for her viral hit, Mad at Disney, that's all over TikTok. Today, we have Salem iIese here to talk about the special day for her most famous sidekick. October 19th is a very special day to me because it is the birthday of my bearded dragon, Little Cow. I got Little Cow about a year ago when I first moved to LA. I really wanted a pet, and my boyfriend, who I live with, really did not. So I waited until he was in Beijing at a songwriting camp. I dropped him off at the airport, and then my roommate Cameron and I went straight to Petco, and we got Little Cow. He is a huge part of my life and also a really big part of my brand. Every time I work on a new song, I play it for him as kind of a litmus test. If he really likes it, he'll climb around and get really excited. But if he doesn't like it, he'll just stare at me and sort of blink as if to say, not so good. He's very helpful. I highly recommend getting a bearded dragon. They make amazing pets and music critics. Happy birthday, Little Cow. And now for our final segment of the day, I'm going to go back to my own photo archives and see what I was up to on an October 19th in my life. On October 19th, 2018, I took a photo of a keychain that I had that says resist on it, and I shared it on my Instagram profile. And it was the first time that I was able to vote. 2018, I was trying to encourage other people to vote as well because I had just recently turned into an eligible voter. And I figure I could take today to also remind you that if you are able to vote this year for the election, it's something that's really important. And I think it's amazing that we have the ability to do that and express the things that we believe in through the power of the voting system. I know it can be really daunting and scary, and sometimes we wonder what the power of one person can do. But when we all choose to incite change in a wave, in a group of people, I think we can truly make radical change. So that's all for today's episode of 365 Days with mxmtoon. Thank you all so much for tuning in and listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you subscribe to it wherever you listen to it, and you can follow at 365 Days mxmtoon on all platforms to keep up to date as we release new episodes. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
It's 365 with mxmtoon. New facts every day, so don't leave too soon. I'm gonna teach you stuff, no it won't be tough. Gonna go a year till you've had